Okay, hello everybody. I assume there's somebody there. I have no idea, but good to see you. It's a lovely sunny day. I'm sure that we would much rather be out doing some field work, but instead you've got me talking about the work at Medmerry in West Sussex. So I'm just going to put on the slides now, and I haven't done this before, so it seems to be working okay. I hope you can see it. Okay, well, I'm going to be talking about the work we've been doing at Medmerry with a group from the Chichester and District Archaeology Society. But we haven't only been working at Medmerry. Here are some images of sites in Chichester Harbour. There are lithic and ceramic assemblages at various places around the harbour, and some of these are being investigated by Jeremy Board and de Potier. So that's one element of work. We're also interested in routes around the harbour in terms of wadeways, that's routeways on foot essentially, and also structures associated with the navigation in the harbour. Here, for example, you can see an artificial gravel projection really, which we're interpreting as a gravel haven structure, basically for beaching and protecting small boats. Mark Seaman is leading the work on routes in the harbour, as we're calling this project. And then, in addition to that, of course, we have new reports of sites that we didn't know about before. Here at East Head, the mouth of Chichester Harbour, we have very recently had this structure reported. It's a circular structure of timber, as you see. It's at the apex of a V-shaped fish trap, essentially, and it seems to be a distinctively southern type of fish trap with a circular pond at the apex. One of these in Southampton Water has been dated as the Middle Saxon period. But really, we need to get out to plan and to sample this structure for some radiocarbon dating. So we're not only working at Medmerry, but Medmerry is perhaps our main focus. So where is it? Why is it called Medmerry, in fact? Now, this is a fairly imaginative map produced by Wallace in 1999. It purports to show the coastline, well, between the Iron Age and Saxon periods. You can probably make out the on coastline is indicated along here, and it goes from Portsmouth here down to Selsey and over to Littlehampton over here. And this is the Isle of Wight. So, but ignore the details of this. The main thing about it is that there were, at one time, a great many more embayments and a great many more islands than there are now. And this very indented coastline was protected by this, or a structure somewhere out here like this, which is a gravel bank, basically, which reduces the energy of tidal impact. So these different embayments, some of which persist today, were able to persist. This offshore barrier, we think, was probably destroyed from the 14th century onwards during a period of climatic change and increasing storminess. So this is Selsey here, Seal's Eye, Selsey, the Seals Island. This is Thorney Island here, Thorney Island, meaning obviously an island covered with thorns, and this here is Medmerry, the middle island. That's what Medmerry means. So it's really in this area here that we've been focusing our attention. That just gives you a bit of wider context, so I hope that's clear. Looking at the area from the air, and these are actually both holiday snaps. This is taken by our chairman on the way back to Gatwick, I suppose. We're looking southeast. This is Selsey here. This is Bracklesham here, and here is this open area, which is Medmerry. And this I took from the boat going over to Lavra. You can see basically we have a number of zones. We've got the sea, obviously. We've got the marshes and the coastal plain, and we've got the South Downs behind that. So it's essentially the coastal marshes and the immediate coastal plain that we're looking at. Okay, well, let's look at the area in a bit more detail. These are images taken from two successive Ordnance Survey maps, one produced in 2009 and one in 2015. Now, as you see, in 2009, the coastline was very straight. It was very artificial, in fact, because the gravel and shingle bank, which protected this area, was artificially maintained. It was bulldozed into place. And this was felt to be not a very sustainable long-term solution to managing the area. And so a realignment plan was instigated. This involves, first of all, the construction of a new seawall, which you can see going around here, which much more effectively protects the settlements around the area. In order to get spoil to create this seawall, of course, a number of borrow pits had to be dug out, and we'll come back to that later. But once the seawall was in place, the final stage was to breach the gravel bank, so this could resume the kind of paleogeography that it would naturally have without the gravel bank being there. But things are not fixed. The coastline is constantly changing, and this map of 2015 is now quite out of date because the position of the breach has moved very significantly, and it will continue to do so until it reaches some kind of stability. Alongside that, the gravel and shingle bank is moving backwards, so moving inland, and that's an important point which we'll come back to. It's historically been quite an important feature of the landscape. Well, I mentioned that a number of borrow pits had to be dug to obtain material for the bank, but there was also some excavation in order to reduce the level of the flooded area in order to enable certain kinds of habitat to develop. And a program of excavations was undertaken by Archaeology Southeast, which I'll call ASE from now on, mainly around 2013. And the work they did was published in 2019, A View from the Edge, Spoiling Publications, Monograph 20. I haven't time really to go through everything that they found, but they found a very interesting and long-term sequence of archaeology and geology. This here is a very large erratic. It was transported along the channel by icebergs during a glacial phase, and we quite commonly find erratics of this sort. In subsequent periods, they found settlement and some burials at a number of periods, in the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Roman period, a little bit of Saxon activity, and a great many fish traps of mainly medieval date. In addition to that, they recorded more recent agricultural features and military features because Medmerry has in the past been an important military site. One type of site which cropped up quite a bit, in fact perhaps the commonest type of prehistoric site, is the burnt mound or burnt spread. These are scatters of heat-shattered flint, Bronze Age in date. We don't know their ultimate function, but at least one role they played was to produce hot water. Essentially, pits were dug or tanks were made with timber, whichever, and heated flints were thrown into that container in order to produce hot water. What use was made of the hot water, we don't really know, but bathing certainly seems to be a possibility. So we'll come back to burnt mounds in a bit, but we've certainly found quite a few more in our work on the shoreline. Okay, so this is an eroding coast. It's subject to direct wave action, as you see here at Selsey. The long-term result of that is, as I've said, to make the gravel bank move inland, but it also lowers the beach level. And this shows a groin in Medmerry in March 2016. Now, in January of that year, the beach level had been up here. by March, it had been scoured down to there. So we've got a situation really where the beach is constantly coming and going. And when it's going is the period that we need to be there, really. Typically after major storms, removes a great deal of beach material and gives us the opportunity to well, find new sites, essentially. So what I'll do, I've been asked to go on for about a half an hour, so for the next 10, 15 minutes, I'll just talk through the sequence of archaeology and paleoecology, for that matter, at the site. Now, the earliest post-glacial material that we see are the remains of a submerged forest at a fairly low tide, fairly well down the tidal sequence. This shows a couple of trees here and some vertical. There are also root systems within this. Well, of course, these sorts of submerged forests are quite common around the country, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with them. And they're also different dates, but this particular one is Neolithic. We know that from a radiocarbon date, which was collected from a root system. This looks a little bit odd. Essentially, it's overlain by intertidal clays, but they've been eroded into runnels which cut through. You'll see some more of this later on, but that's just the way that the clays erode here. But what that erosion has done is to reveal this root system. We removed just the few outer rings from that root in order to date when it ceased to grow, and by inference when that area became waterlogged and salinated. And we have a date of 2455 to 2290 calibrated BC for the tree. We're assuming that the other trees are a similar date. Most likely they are, but we haven't sufficient radiocarbon dates to confirm that. Looking at the stratigraphy, we have a tertiary deposit, clay, basically a stiff clay with flints in it. On that is a paleosoil. On top of that, there are organic deposits with burnt flint, heat shattered flint, part of the burnt flint mound. So this particular mound was located on a dry land surface. That's a wider view, perhaps not a very good one, but it does show where the burnt flint occurs. You can probably see it scattered around on the land surface. Other examples of our burnt flint sites are spills of flint, really, which have gone into intertidal sediment. And you can see here 3 successive spills of burnt flint going into these muds. The dates from Archaeology Southeast on charcoal from these burnt mounds fall in this range, 1740 to 1490 Cal BC. We haven't actually dated charcoal for ours, but we do have a radiocarbon date, which I'll talk about in a moment. We haven't had a single artifact from the beach sites, and the only bone we found was of the Great Northern Diver, which was identified by Polly Baker. It presumably just got there by accident. It's quite interesting because the fact that a bird bone survives shows that if there had been animal bone, mammal bone, that too would have survived, but it hasn't. So we can be fairly confident that these sites weren't related in any way to cooking. As I say, we don't have dates for the burnt mounds itself, but we do have a date on this. This is a linear hurdle fence, which I don't know what that noise was, which was associated with one of the burnt mounds, and it comes out with a date of 1555 to 1450 Cal BC, which falls within the range of the dates that Archaeology Southeast obtained. So that's the Bronze Age, and that's mainly what we've got, burnt mounds. Moving on to the Iron Age, well, we only have one site, really. And this is a site which wasn't excavated by us, it was actually excavated by the police. It was reported to them by a dog walker and lifted by the police. They had to do what they well, you know what the police have to do. They got it out rough fast on a rising tide, and they didn't pay any attention to the context. But we do have this one mobile phone image of the bones in situ. And you can probably make out there is the lower jaw, thumb loose. There's the cranium. Here's the spinal column. And by the time this photo was taken, the limbs had eroded away. I also just ask you to note these things here, these black objects, which I'll come back to, but look very like timber planks to me. So that's the only picture of the site we have in context. We have a date, because the police obviously took a date. You know, they weren't sure whether it was recent or not. So it's Iron Age. It's probably middle-aged man, arthritis of the spine. He has cribra orbitalia, that's perforations at the back of the orbit related to nutritional deficiencies. He has a lot of tooth wear, calculus and periodontal disease. So this doesn't really look like a high status individual. We don't really know the stratigraphic context, but looking at that photo, the grey colour of the surrounding sediment strongly indicates that it's an intertidal creek. And as I've mentioned, the dark stripes around the head seem to be the degraded remains of wooden planks, which suggests that the skeleton could have come from a planked structure, perhaps a platform or a boat. So this wasn't really a conventional burial. It is more probably a placed body in a creek and on some sort of wooden structure. And this would fit quite well with Iron Age practice. So that's what we think it is. But that's the only evidence we have on the shoreline of Iron Age activity, though there is settlement further inland. Where are the Romans? Well, as you know, Romans had a lot of stuff. Wherever Romans have been, if they've been there, you find a lot of pots, a lot of artifactual material in general. And we don't find that at all, even though we're not very far from Fishbourne Roman Palace and from Chichester, and also that there was settlement further inland of lower status. But we do have this one single find made by Peter King. This is the lower part of, well, it's half of the lower stone of a rotary quern, and it is almost certainly Roman. How it got there, heaven knows, it's unstratified. It's probably from a wreck or from an eroded rubbish deposit. After that, we have something of a gap in our sequence. We have not until really about the 16th century AD do we start picking up archaeology again. We have these braced timber fish traps. You can see these are vertical posts. These are horizontal braces which held them in place. And there's a line of wattle panels along there. That just shows one of our members, Hugh Fisk, recording the fish traps for 3D imagery. And there is a rotatable 3D image on our website if you want to have a better look at this. Anyway, these structures are fundamentally 16th century in date, and we do also have some documentary evidence relating to stationary fishing at this period, because it was disapproved of by the offshore fishermen who thought that the stationary fishers on shore were depleting their stocks, which they may well have been to some extent. Here's a fish basket, also similar sort of date, somewhere between about 1450, 1630, 16th century really. This is in situ, and this is after being cleaned up. It seems to be either a fish basket or the base of an eel trap. And we have more recent stationary fishery as well. This is the base of what's called a French pattern shrimp or prawn trap, which is weighted down with interwoven flints. You can probably see one there. And that's what the whole thing would have looked like when in use. So plenty of evidence for stationary fishery. And in fact, even more. This is very frustrating. This is one arm of a newly seen V-shaped fish trap. It's about 25 meters long. We first saw this lace in February 2020, just before a coronavirus lockdown. we were waiting for a low tide to go out and plan it and obtain samples for radiocarbon dating. But of course, we haven't been able to get out there. I'm going to hazard a guess that it's medieval, but we do need a plan, and we do need some dates, so we will be going out there. Other finds include timbers from wrecks, from timber vessels. There are a couple, probably 18th, 19th century wrecks, maybe from one known one, the Hasted Prize, which is just offshore, or maybe from some completely unknown wreck. And this is an 18th century slow match pouch. It's made of leather. It's made of, it basically makes a pouch in which a smouldering fuse could be kept, which was used on naval vessels for igniting grenades. So you could ignite your grenade without having an open flame. That's now been given to the Royal Navy Museum for conservation and display. And again, it might have come from the wreck of the Hazardous Prize, or it might be from some other ship entirely. Okay, well, we also have evidence for destroyed farms along the coast. This is one. This is Thorney Farm. You can see part of the wall still standing there. It's a very characteristically Sussex 19th century wall. We were able to get out there and make a plan of what survived. There were no artifacts, oddly enough, from this site whatsoever. You would expect some pot, but we didn't find any. So it looks like this was a farmyard area, not a domestic site. If it was a farm there in the 19th century, also, it might have been a suitable site for one earlier. So we'll be looking out for this. Here are two wells, which were associated with Thorney Farm. One of them made of chalk blocks, neatly cut, and one of them made of timber and brick. We tried to excavate these, but they're both filled with flowing sand, so we weren't able to get anything datable from them. This shows the demise of Thorney Farm, really. Here it is in 1842. Here's the sea, here's Thorney Farm. Here it is 1875, here's the sea, rather closer. Here it is in 1896, still closer, and this is 1933. No farm, it's gone. It's actually under the shingle bank there, and it's only now that it's being exposed on the beach. We know from oral history that it had gone by 1914. In fact, there was still farming there, construction of the growing of hay, but there was no farm, and the product was transported across the dunes back to Selsey to Miss Scrimger's barn. And this shows 1937 wagon load of hay being carried over the dunes back down to Selsey for use in the stables. One other find we made this year is part of the old Coast Guard station at Medmerry. This is shown on a map of 1875, but it was demolished after that and buried under the shingle bank. Only in January this year was it re-exposed by recession of the shingle ridge, which has gone back. You can perhaps see in the right-hand image to here. So this was formerly under that bank. We expect to see more of this building as it erodes further back. Just a few dimensions. Basically, there are bedrooms, there are fireplaces. There's probably a garden and a path associated with it, a certain amount of Victorian pottery, and the base of a wine or port bottle. And again, Hugh Fisk has made a 3D model, which you can look at on our website. Other activity in this area included marshal and drainage ditches of 19th century date, which are now on the shore, but formerly were landwards of the sea bank. And into them have fallen concrete anti-tank blocks and also blocks of labradorite rubble, which is being used for the new sea defences. But some of these, I think this one, maybe this one, are actually cast concrete blocks. And they're very defended shore, like most of the south coast. As in many areas, there was an initial first phase defence of beach scaffolding, which you can see here. Now, in most places, it's been removed. but not here. It's a little bit too remote for anybody to have bothered. So there's a lot of surviving 1940s scaffolding on the shore, and also an awful lot of ordnance. From time to time, the Royal Engineers have to may have to come to detonate ordnance that's found there. These are mainly cannon bullets from an air-to-ground gunnery range. So that brings me to the end. I'd like to thank the CDAS team for their stalwart work, the RSPB for giving access, James Kenny, Archaeology South East, and the CITiZAN team for professional support, and Luke Barber of Sussex Archaeological Collections, who has edited a publication which we hope will appear in 2020 in his volume. So I finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's fantastic. It's such a very, very exciting site. We have a couple of questions. The first is somebody wondering if the Iron Age human remains were discovered broadly in the same area as the large quantities of Iron Age coins and coin hoards recovered over the last 100 years.
No. It's they're actually at Selsey itself. The hoards essentially are at Selsey. We think there's probably a trading settlement there, but that's largely built over. We're much further west than that, so it seems to be an isolated burial in a creek.
Thank you. Another question is asking how much of the archaeology has been exposed because of the managed alignment scheme.
Well, it's a combination of things, really. The channel going through the breach has shifted its position laterally, so it exposes things as it shifts position. But also, in addition to that, we've got the long-term landers movement of the shingle bank, which is depleting the level of the beach. So it's a combination of natural processes and human intervention to a large extent, but it's mainly the cessation of human intervention that's causing the main changes we're seeing now.
Oh, very interesting. And also associated with the alignment scheme, someone is wondering if how the local population reacted to the managed alignment scheme. How did that go down? Do you know?
Well, there were some people found the idea of surrendering land a little bit difficult because there's no tradition of doing that in this country. But of course, the overall sea defences put in place by the Environment Agency massively increased people's safety. So I think on balance, things were pretty favourable. There's some people had objections. Yeah, I mean, I don't actually live there, so haven't exactly got my finger on the pulse. But I know there was some objections to the scheme and some enthusiasm.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to flick back this time. Hopefully, will actually show my screen. Which apologies for the very beginning. I'm afraid my slides weren't showing. Just to say that if you would like to find out more about the work of CITiZAN, then please have a look at our website, where you'll find lots more information about what we do. And here you'll also see the link to the website for the Chichester and District Archaeological Society. Finally, well, thank you very much for joining. Please do take a minute to complete the feedback form. We hope that you can join us again in the future, and in the meantime, stay safe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.